Thank you. Wow, amazing if you started like every meeting with that, right? Like just people stand up and cheer. Man, I'd have a lot more energy. So I'm really excited to be here. I think Big Omaha is truly one of the best startup conferences out there. And hats off to Jeff and the whole Silicon Prairie team, because this is exceptional. So my topic today is a little uncomfortable. It's kind of about how I suck. So I'm going to stand up here for the next 20 minutes and talk to you about some of the biggest mistakes I've made running a startup. This is uncomfortable for me. It's a little humbling. It hurts my ego. But I think it's important. And I think it's something that we don't really talk about. Is, you know, the fact that we have little failures every day, but you can also have catastrophic, almost life-altering failure, and you can bounce back. So if you'll bear with me, I would like you to experience my story. So this probably comes as a surprise to some of you who don't know the story, especially knowing that my company was acquired back in the fall. But I actually shut down my company last summer. After 2 years of pouring my life, everyone sort of can attest to the energy and effort that goes into running a startup, I had to say goodbye to it. Right? My baby, I had to shut it down. And there was a series of probably very poor decisions that led to that moment. And while it does have a happy fairy tale ending, I don't recommend shutting down your startup to try and get acquired. So just want to put that right out there at the beginning. So I'd like to talk to you a little bit about this. So first and foremost, in the beginning, my projections look like yours do right now, right? Everything. I mean, users, revenue, everything was a hockey stick. And the nice part is, when you've already launched for like 2 months, everything does look like that, right? I mean, you know, from 5 users to 10 users, man, that's a hockey stick, right? You're good. And so we were getting a lot of press. We launched Sprouter. Just so everyone who knows, Sprouter was an online and is an online Q&A for entrepreneurs. So you can go on and get advice from people who've already been there. We were getting a lot of coverage. We were everywhere, right? You feel pretty good when you see your name being splashed around the magazines and the papers, and you have a sense of things are going really, really well. Sadly, when you're getting all this hype and you're going through this, sometimes you ignore one of the biggest problems that you have, and that's that your customers don't understand what your product is. So my first piece of unsolicited advice is, if you're ever asked by a potential customer, oh, so sorry, what's the value proposition? That should set off alarm bells that you do not have a product that has achieved market fit yet. You shouldn't have people questioning what the value is of your service. There's a really big piece that hits a lot of startups, and this to me sort of sums up a lot of the problems that I had in the early days of my startup, is that my ego got in the way of achieving product market fit. When customers would say that they didn't understand what the value was of the service, I would get irritated. Like, these people clearly don't get what I'm trying to build, right? And try and move on, versus actually taking that and thinking about it and thinking, if they don't get it, we must be doing something wrong. So it turns out that hockey stick that we all like to envision isn't really a hockey stick. It looks a lot more like that, right? So that hockey stick is at the beginning when you get the launch hype, and then all of a sudden it disappears. And that first moment where you realize things aren't going to be a really fast, big win, you're not going to be Facebook overnight, is a little disenchanting. So this is my startup journey. Launch hype, and every time we'd start iterating, we'd get a little bit closer to being successful, but it was little humps, right? We weren't still there yet. And at some point, after 6 tries of trying to move this product and push out changes and try and increase sort of the community engagement, you start to feel what I call the plateau of disenchantment. This idea of, man, is this ever going to happen? Am I ever going to wake up one morning and feel like we've made a big success? And it's terrible, but the reality is most startups have what I call the sloth ascent. It's slow, it's gradual, and it's a grind. And it takes perseverance, and it takes a hell of a lot of hustle to make it work. So when I'm in the plateau of disenchantment, I tend to panic. And that's not a really great place to make decisions from. Right? That feeling of, I'm overwhelmed, I don't know what to do, holy hell, how am I going to make payroll next week? That's not a really good place for operating strategically, right? This is that point as a startup founder where you start chasing opportunities, right? Anything. Like, oh, this looks big and shiny, I'll run toward that. And then, oh, this looks big and shiny, I'll run to that. And that leads to a whole host of problems. So here are my key lessons. Number one is you have limited resources. You need to focus. Don't try and do everything. And when things aren't going well, don't try and run 100 experiments by trying to find different products and different services. Double down on what's working and pool all of your resources onto making that work. This is also a big one, especially for me. I'm sure a lot of people in here would describe themselves as builders, right? You're product creators. And I fell in love with Sprouter. I still love Sprouter to this day. I was in love with the solution we had created. I forgot that we were trying to solve a problem and that the product could constantly be iterated. So my biggest advice to startup founders these days is to fall in love with the problem. If you have a problem that you dedicate yourself to solving, you can always change the product, right? You can keep iterating and changing it. As long as you keep true to that same core product, or sorry, problem, you're not pivoting. This is also a big lesson. This may seem pretty obvious to a lot of people, but in our wonderful world of expectations of free, there is a big difference between users who use your service without paying and customers. Those are the people who give you money. We did a really bad job of customers. We did a great job at getting users, and we thought that having all of these wonderfully engaged members around the world using our service meant that we were doing well. But they weren't paying us for the service that they were using. And instead of thinking, okay, how do we make these people pay? We thought, we'll monetize later. If anyone right now is starting a company in the audience and is thinking about, I will just build a big user base and I will figure out how to monetize as we go along, stop immediately. Please come talk to me afterwards. I will pull your head out of your ass. That is not the way to launch a business. All right. If you have a user base that is not paying for your product, you need to find another way to monetize. You need to have customers. If they're not the customer, someone else needs to. You need to sell the data. You need to have advertising, whatever it is. But if you have something that's free, it's not a business. The reality is that startups fail from not having paying customers. Your startup will never go under because it doesn't have all these fancy features and products and bells and whistles. Ship early, ship often, ship fast, and make sure people are paying for the value that you're providing them. This is a big one, being sales focused. Too many entrepreneurs, myself included, like to think that we're, above sales. We're the product people, right? I create things, I build stuff. I'm out there, I've got the vision, I'm the strategy person. Well, sorry, you're also the chief salesperson. Your job is to get customers. Your job is to sell people on the vision, to get people to use it. You are the chief evangelist for your company, and you are responsible for that bottom line. You can't hide behind sort of saying that you're not a salesperson. The reality is, when you're a startup of 1 or 2 people, you have to be the salesperson. You don't have the luxury of having a sales team. So you have to be sales focused. And too many startup founders make this mistake of thinking that they'll build a cool product and that they'll get salespeople later. If you don't like sales, get over it. Find a way. Read books, talk to other people, fake it until you make it. But you have to be your chief salesperson. Cash flow is everything. I can't tell you the number of people I've talked to in the past little while who can't explain to me what their cash flow is. You should know that off the top of your head. You need to know how much money is coming into your business, how much money is already in the bank, and how much money is going out. You need to know your runway, right? You need to make sure that you're managing your finances closely. I have a dashboard that I use. I will give credit to Bessemer Ventures. I did not invent it. I stole it shamelessly. You have to set goals for yourself, right? You have to measure, test, learn, and adjust. And this doesn't just apply to revenue, but across your business. Here's the 6 things that every single founder in this room, if you're running a business, you should have and know like the back of your hand. Committed monthly revenue, right? How much money is actually coming in? Cash flow, how much money is going in, how much money is coming out, how much runway you have. Customer pipeline, right? How many customers look like they're going to close, right? You think about it as a big funnel. You should be looking at how many customers you retain, especially if you have a subscription business. When are people canceling, right? If you have a 12-month subscription business, is everyone canceling on the 6th month, right? Are people going for 2 years, 3 years? You need to know these things. The cost of acquisition for a customer is something that too few people actually calculate. If you're spending $5 to acquire every customer through your Facebook ads and through the time of you being on Twitter all day trying to reach out to people, and they're only bringing in $2 of revenue for you on a monthly basis, that math doesn't add up. It really comes down to math. It's a scary thing. Just like sales, nobody likes metrics, nobody likes math. And this is one of those big conundrums you need to get past. You need to manage the data in your organization. Customer lifetime value is a big deal too. You want to know if you acquire a customer, how much value you think that you can derive on average going forth. Again, I will credit Bessemer Ventures for this list. Striving for success, but preparing for failure. It's an interesting sort of paradigm that we all exist in, right? Majority of startups fail. That's kind of freaking terrifying, right? I mean, if you're gambling, right, at these odds, you wouldn't play. And yet we do. And so you have to be prepared for the fact that there's going to be a lot of failure and that you're going to face sort of life ending, and sometimes you're going to have to walk away. But you need to act like you're going to build the next big business. You need to move ahead with the sort of velocity and ferociousness that you are going to be successful, that you are going to be the next Zuckerberg. This is a big one that I didn't learn until a little too late. Documents matter. At the beginning, when you're poor and you're just trying to pour all of your money that you do have into building your products and maybe making your first hire, the idea of spending thousands of dollars on accountants and lawyers seems a little asinine. Turns out that whether you're closing down your business or selling your business, those documents become really, really important. And those documents that you don't have could mean the difference between you being successful and crying into your pillow at night. It's really, really, really important that you don't skip out on two things: a good accountant and a good lawyer. And if you have co-founders, you need to have agreements between you. You need to decide what happens in certain situations, right? If somebody decides to walk away from the business, do they retain equity, right? If something goes wrong, who's left with that liability? All these kinds of things, employee agreements, investor agreements. It really comes down to what's on paper, not what's been said over beers and handshakes. At the end of the day, most startups fail, though, because the founders give up. It gets really tough, and there are days, and it's a roller coaster, and everybody who's been on the stage has talked to you about this horrible roller coaster. You have high highs, you have low lows, and the best thing that you can do is persevere. Because if most startups fail because you give up, I think the answer is pretty simple. Don't give up. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So I was asked to leave time for Q&A, and I would love if anyone does have questions or wants to talk, or pitch me your company. I'm more than happy to listen to that too.
Wow, what an offer. Please come up, guys, right here. Other side of the stage, please come up for your questions. I'll ask the very first question. You talked about the importance, and we know this, of focus, okay? So what's the difference between focus and iterating, if there is one?
Well, this is tough, right? I mean, so many businesses, sort of confuse the two. I think you can be really, really focused and still iterate. And that goes right back to that whole product, being dedicated to the problem that you're trying to solve and knowing that you can move the solution, right? And every single business out there today has iterated, has changed, has evolved based on the customer feedback. So as long as you're staying focused to what your mission is, you can iterate that product, and it's not a lack of focus.
Friends, any questions? Here we have one right over here.
Sorry, your talk was great. Could you talk a little bit more about how you fall in love with the problem, like some things that you've done, or just expand on that?
Yeah, so just to give you a little bit of background, I know I sort of shrimped down on that. I started a company, or a couple startups in my teens. They went terribly. I found it really difficult as a young entrepreneur to grow up in a small town, didn't have any connections, to really sort of reach out and have that sort of support network that I think is really necessary and probably a lot of the reason why you're here. And so I built Sprouter to solve that need. I was just obsessed with it. It should be easier if you're an entrepreneur to get help, to get those resources. And I fell in love with that idea, and everything that we've done since really rides on that, right? So Sprouter helps connect you with people who can help you with your business. We also throw events around the world. We do a newsletter that highlights some of the best innovation. And of course, with BetaKit now, we're profiling the best in emerging tech around the world.
Yeah, an interesting graphic up there, and it showed the humps early on, right? Talk to me a little bit about experiencing the humps and how you plow through the humps without giving up.
Yeah, I mean, it's challenging, right? You're all going to face days where you can't believe that it's this hard. And I think the best thing that you can do is build a support network around yourself. Make sure you're talking to other founders. Nobody is going to understand what it's like to build your startup than someone else who's doing a startup, right? We all go through it. We all understand it. And I think it's important to know that you're not alone in it. Sort of like a Jenny Craig for, entrepreneurs.
A Jenny Craig
Together
for
we can.
entrepreneurs. Somebody tweet that immediately, please. Megan, please.
Thank you so much for coming here today. I find your business and your story really inspirational, and one that I feel like I identify with a little bit too. I wanted to ask you, what's an example, what do you feel is one of the most creative ways that you've ever solved a problem that you faced in a startup?
Really? Am I allowed to say that
Yeah.
I drink profusely? Is that it? So, drinking and startups go hand in hand, by the way. So I find that the best way to solve problems, at least for me, is to take a break from them. That may sound like a really weird thing, and I'm sure the science is behind it, but sometimes when you're really consumed with something, I don't think you can see past it. And so taking a break from it, walking away. My best ideas come in the shower. Also something I don't want on the internet, but that's okay. So I think sort of creatively, sometimes it's good to take a break and release.
So we're at an event put on by SPN. You've got BetaKit. Why BetaKit? Why is it important? Why are things like SPN important? And what's the difference between something like TechCrunch or Pando, what you guys are doing, what SPN is doing?
Yeah, sure, great. Well, first of all, let me state that I am a massive fan of Silicon Prairie News, and that's why I'm here. Still trying to convince those guys that they should work with BetaKit. So the importance behind, I think, all of the tech publications is helping give visibility to all of the projects that we're all working on, right? I think one from a standpoint of it's just good to know what's happening, but also think about all of these big companies that you know, right? Like they don't have the visibility. You see things days, weeks, months before most of the people in the world see it, right? And stuff's accelerating so fast. And it's really, really important to try and see around the corner as you're building your business, whether it's small or large. And so the difference between BetaKit and in my mind, between TechCrunch and some of the other ones that you mentioned, is really our focus on helping C-level executives in big companies understand what's coming and why it's relevant to them. And so we're focused on giving visibility to entrepreneurs, but also making sense of that data through trend reports that are released quarterly. Oh, sorry.
Hi, my name's Dave. As a father of two daughters, I always think about what I can do to give them the best example and
That wasn't me.
the best example and upbringing that'll help them be the most successful in life. Can you talk a little bit about how your upbringing and maybe the environment your family had that gave you the courage and the foundation to go out and be an entrepreneur?
Sure. So first of all, that is an issue really dear to my heart. I think that we need to do a better job of encouraging children everywhere to get into entrepreneurship. But I will tell you that I grew up in a household with two professionals, neither of which were entrepreneurs. But my parents, from a really young age, used to tell me two things. One, that I would never get rich working for someone else. And two, that sports were good and boys were bad. But that's a whole different discussion. But I think it's really important to give children role models, right? For me, I mean, I grew up in a small town. I didn't have visibility to this world, to what was happening. I just didn't even know it was a viable career path. I didn't really know until, I started to build something and someone told me I was an entrepreneur. I never even heard the word, right? And so I think it's really important, the sort of more visibility we can give about that is, we only see what's right in front of us. When I was a kid, I thought I could be a doctor, a teacher, a professional, because that's what I saw. I didn't know what I didn't know. And so I think that the more we can give visibility, and specifically to women, I think women entrepreneurs, I can tell you this, and I have to keep forgetting that this is being broadcasted and I'm going to be held accountable for this later, but I remember walking past a newsstand and seeing Gina Bianchini, who's the founder of Ning, on the cover of Fast Company. And she just looked powerful. And I grabbed this magazine and I went and I was reading it. And she was talking about viral loops and building communities. And I remember thinking, wow, that's awesome. I could do that, right? And they talked about how she wasn't a programmer. She was building a tech startup and she wasn't a programmer. And that really stuck with me. I still have the magazine. I mean, I think that giving that kind of visibility and that kind of insight is really, really important. And hopefully we can do more to sort of reach out to younger children, sort of boys and girls alike.
So you've had the opportunity to see hundreds or thousands of entrepreneurs come to Sprouter and share the kinds of problems that they're having. What would you say are the most common things that entrepreneurs are struggling with? And then if you could speak to some of the advice that they usually receive.
Yeah. So I mean, obviously with Sprouter, the top question is always, how do I get money? But outside of that, people are really looking for help at various stages of their business, right? It's challenging when you haven't done it before. Pricing a product for the first time, looking at your competitors, trying to decide how much of your revenue should go back into your business versus into your pocket, and when should you hire your first salesperson, and how much money should go into marketing. I mean, there's so many subtle nuances into running a business, and every week sort of brings new challenges that are unforeseen. And so the idea with Sprouter was, make it accessible so that you could ask a question and get an answer for somebody who's already been there, so you don't need to make those mistakes. But I really think that the most powerful thing is community. The most powerful thing is surrounding yourself with people who have already been successful, making those connections, having that network, being able to draw on that expertise, learn from other people's mistakes rather than make your own.
Thanks.
Hi, Sarah. My name's Corey.
We hugged yesterday. Did we hug yesterday?
We hugged yesterday.
See? Thank you, Antonio.
Hugs are great. I wanted to ask you, what are some of the decisions that you made early on and how did those decisions play out over the long run, and how long did you have to make up your mind as to whether those were good decisions or bad decisions?
Oh, that's a loaded question. I've shared with you numerous bad decisions that I've made. I think one of the ones that I haven't mentioned, though, is early on in my career, I paid a lot of attention to critics, right? It's really easy today to get on the internet and start seeing what's being written about your company, written about you. And, at the beginning, that's really tough, right? Like, I wanted to reach out and strangle everybody, and you want to write back and be like, that's not true, why are you writing that? And so I think, one of the things that sort of evolved over time is you realize that you can't please everybody, and in order to get ahead, you're going to have to piss off a few people. And that's very un-Canadian-like, but it's true.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much.